So the title, yeah, I know it sounds like you're just about to walk into a creepy fantasy land, but no, really, it isn't just a disturbing add-on because it's actually a plot point. Yeah, that didn't help at all, did it? Well, the title aside, going into this, I definitely thought it had potential to be really original. I mean, there seems to be an abnormally large amount of anime that take place in a high school in Japan, in an alternate dimension in Japan, or in a Japanese high school in an alternate dimension. Not that I'm complaining, mind you, because we've gotten some really amazing anime out of this setup that I really do love. However, if most anime wanted to have a magical type plot, it would most likely be set in the future or Fantasyland, but this anime shows a set in the past, and in France no less, which definitely piqued my curiosity. Unfortunately, it was anything but definable. Now don't get me wrong, I don't hate this anime because it didn't really do anything that was terribly bad. Although on the other hand, nothing is noteworthy as almost all the characters and motivation are basic at best, the presentation of the plot is pretty uninteresting, and nothing is done of a large amount of definability to easily make this anime completely forgettable. So the setting takes place during the 100 Years' War between France and England, back when fighting each other was their favorite pastime. As this conflict takes place, there lives the witch Maria, who hates war and does whatever she can to stop the fighting, regardless of whoever tries to stop her, whether that be people or even angels. Taking a look at Maria herself, she has a pretty bland basic personality with nothing special or unique about her. The only scene that I'll admit that I really liked with her was when she was first introduced, where the anime is able to trick the audience by playing around with the stereotypical depictions of a witch. However, good introductions don't make good characters. I'll be fair and say that she does have somewhat of a personality, but it's a pretty basic, nice and peppy personality. If you were to ask me to quote a line she said, I honestly don't think I could do that, where in contrast, with a character like Elle from Death Note, that task could be an absolute breeze. Along with her pretty uninteresting personality, she has a pretty weak motivation. Here's a good question I keep finding myself asking: why is Maria a good witch, and why is she so intent on stopping the fighting even though she's most likely going to die because of her intervention? The only answer the anime seems to give out is that she's a nice person, which is a pretty weak reason. Why doesn't the anime present a tragic backstory, or at least something that would make for a better motivation? Especially considering how much danger she puts herself in, being nice is definitely not a very good justification as to why she would continuously try to stop the war. The writers try to expand on her motivation by, instead of focusing on her mindset, just having her get relatively bothered over people hurting each other without any sense of drama or relatability. Other things, like her wanting to protect people, are for such basic reasons that they don't offer her any definability. Now, the point here I'm trying to make is not that she has an absolute lack of motivation, but rather it's so uninteresting and uninspired it really makes her character hard to get behind and flat out boring. If you never give any reasons to make your character stand out, you can't honestly expect the audience to care all that much about them. Next up is Maria's love interest Joseph, who follows along the trend of being pretty uninteresting. He suffers in the same way Maria does by having a personality that is pretty uninspired. He is just a nice, caring guy, and that's pretty much all that defines him. No backstory or anything that could give him a sense of definability. The best thing the anime has to try to help his character is a pretty weak romance with Maria. You know how in a lot of great romance anime there's moments and scenes that help to justify why the two love interests have potential? With some good justification as to why the two have legitimate feelings for each other, along with perhaps even some good drama and struggles for them to overcome together. With the end goal being that every time the two characters are together, the audience is immediately invested. Yeah, instead of doing any of that stuff, the anime just casually has the two act awkward around each other, usually about something perverted, or just have the two act like acquaintances, and that's just about it. No romantic reasoning as to why they work well as a couple, and definitely not a reason for the audience to care about it. So when Joseph confessed that he loved Maria, the only thing I could think of was, why, you two never had any romantic connection at all? I will admit that he does have a good fight scene at the end that could have had some good tension, but that's only if the audience could have found investment in his character and his struggle, and considering how uninteresting he is, I doubt that many people would be on the edge of their seats. Next on the list we have the monks who try to work against Maria and her meddling in the war. Now, I won't say they are extremely contrived or made me so mad I wanted to introduce my head to a cheese grater, but they still have some problems. I'll start off by saying the only thing I really liked about them is that the anime never tried to shoehorn in the most evil puppy-kicking thing the writers can think of out of a desperate attempt to try to make the audience hate them. When this writing technique is used, it can make a villain seem simple-minded, lacking in character, and extremely fake. But instead of doing that, the anime gives the motivation in that Maria's works may cause more problems and that witches typically aren't a good thing. Although on that note, it would have been so much smarter to go into detail with this concept, as the motivation is basically just because witches are known to be bad, instead of showing an actual example of this, and perhaps it could have really gone into detail with the mindset of one of the monks. Sure, it is a legitimate motivation, and trust me, I do appreciate that. A lot. But it also is a pretty flat and devoid of depth motivation also. In other words, if their motivation was a grade, it would be a passing grade and not a "your paper was so amazing it made my computer explode with wonder and metal" kind of way. Feel free to use that if you want, it's a pretty good example. Now on to one of the more negative sides, there is some pretty sloppy writing with these guys also. For example, the anime keeps shoving in multiple scenes that all have the exact same purpose of saying the monks are going to take action against Maria. Yeah guys, I got the idea when they called Maria a heretic. You don't need 3 separate scenes that all contain the exact same idea. I get the foreshadowing. Please stop trying to shove it down my throat. I can't breathe. Were the writers short on time, or do they honestly don't understand that foreshadowing is at least supposed to be somewhat subtle, but here it comes off as the anime is obsessively scared I might forget it. Another case of poor writing is when the monk commissions someone to carry out a goal they know goes against how they are supposed to act, but rather than showing how this hypocrisy works into their character, they openly have him admit what he is doing is wrong. Yeah, no, hey, writers, you do know that any real hypocrite would never admit what they're doing is hypocritical. At least have him make an excuse for this, which would be far less fake looking. When you write a character as being a strict monk and very fond of it, and then you have them admit what they are doing is devilish, it comes off as being a bit forced. The only excuse you could have is if you were able to work this into his character, which the anime definitely doesn't have the development to pull off. A more cynical side of me can't help but wonder what he is thinking after this. Well, I sure hope that mercenary isn't gonna go around spreading rumors that I said we all have a part of the devil in us that I was happy to let myself act on. It's not like that in any way is going to affect what people think of me as a monk. Oh. I mean, did the writers not think of that? Come on guys, connect the strings here. Not to mention, none of the monks have anything to define them on a character or personality level. The anime tries to fix this by having one of the monks go through a sudden change of heart, but because it lacks justification, it easily destroys any value it could have had. There is not any foreshadowing or reasons as to why he would change his mind, and this whole thing is really glanced over. One of the key foundations of characters is giving them a believable thought progression, because the consequence of not doing so is just having things happen because the writer said so, rather than a well thought out story. Unfortunately, these bad writing decisions damage these characters from being something at least mediocre to something pretty weak. The rest of the characters themselves are nothing special. Most of the time they just felt like an add-on instead of actually helping the story. From the other witches to the rest of the villagers, there really isn't anything to grab onto. I will say that I like the little girl who saw Maria just because she had a charming amount of innocence by acting like a normal kid. Along with the grandmother being very nice and sympathetic to see, especially for the little screen time she got, but that's definitely not enough to carry a whole cast. Some of the characters like Garfa had the potential to be interesting, but nothing is done to follow up on any development or exploration they attempted to give him. Such as, they say he wants to be a king, but they never really use this element to grow his character all that much. In some scenes, it even comes off as being relatively forgotten. There isn't any backstory or any way this significantly marks his character. Another character, once again, has a pretty unfleshed out transition between mindsets, where we are never really given anything direct, but rather everything is implied, which is definitely not a strong way to give a connection to the audience. Next up, we are never really given anything that would give value to any of the other witches, the army men, or pretty much any of the other characters. Considering how many characters this anime had, it's kinda surprising how little of an impact they left. Okay, let me say something positive about the anime. The one thing about the world that I legitimately liked is that nothing was just black and white. They don't make all of Group A so unbelievably good and all of Group B so unbelievably evil without any reason whatsoever. For example, the anime puts out the thought that Maria just stopping the fights isn't a surefire way to make the world a better place. This is evident by the anime bringing up the idea that people are fighting out of the desire to fight and don't want to stop and will keep fighting until they see it through. Which in turn would only cause more pain for the surrounding villages and lost resources to keep the men fed and happy. As the battles Maria ends may save lives, but if the battle finished, it might have completely ended the war and in turn saving even more lives and strain on the community. This gave the anime some clear intelligence by exploring a plot point from all different angles. However, it was pretty sad that they never had Maria struggle with this at all. I mean, come on, guys, you had a clear chance to give her some development as she questions herself and ultimately chooses what to do. But no, she's always gung-ho about her actions, never questions them, ever. You had a good opportunity to give her something to make her stand out, and it's ignored. What a waste. Now let's move on back to the negatives. There is a plot point where if Maria loses her virginity, she will also lose her powers. And whatever writer thought this was the best thing to constantly poke fun of over and over again needs a good slap. No, seriously, there is a good chunk of time devoted to Maria's succubus just bringing it up or just trying to get her to get rid of it. Which most of the time results in Maria just acting awkward about it. Whether that's making fun of how Maria can't make an incubus right, or just anything perverted, there's not a single reason to find yourself invested in any of these scenes. There is no sense of wit or unpredictability that could make any of these scenes funny, but rather it comes off as a bunch of immature 6th graders talking about it. I mean, you have angels, witches, several other magical creatures, and even the 100-year war between two of the greatest powers of the day. And what you think deserves attention is Maria's virginity? Really? The interactions don't even highlight the characters in any way. It's the definition of a pointless add-on. Along with this, there are a few scenes that just show Maria bathing or sleeping naked for no reason whatsoever. Do you really think the audience is gonna get bored that fast, guys? From the painful jokes, whose awkward nature is supposed to count as comedy for some reason, to the random fan service, the anime definitely started to drag its feet at times. So in conclusion, excluding a few poor to bad writing decisions, there really isn't anything this anime does that's all that dreadful. There really wasn't enough that was insultingly bad that would lead me to breaking the writer's pencils. Although on the other hand, excluding one plot point, there really wasn't anything that made this anime stand out at all. All of the characters have a basic personality without anything to make them definable. And because they are so uninteresting, it's really hard to find yourself invested in what's going on. A good amount of the characters will just have a sudden change of heart or have a new motivation that doesn't have enough focus as to not have it come off just because the writer said so. I could see some people enjoying this anime, but the best thing I could say about it was meh, and it's something that would be best skipped. Hello, guess what? This is Enslate. We're going, sweet going. I want to eat pizza, so we're gonna do this fast. First up, we have the Labyrinth of Grisaya and Sanaka no How to Raise a Boring Girlfriend. Or you can go in the links in the description, or there's my hummingbird, my Twitter, or I just want some pizza, bye!